a new first-party PlayStation platformer. It's been a while, hasn't it? A few years ago when Sony announced that their Japan studio was getting liquidated, any ounce of interest I had for the at the time brand new PS5 had basically evaporated. For those who don't know, Japan Studio covered many smaller teams and divisions internally that worked on a large variety of different series dating back to the PS1, jumping between being a support studio or doing their own stuff in-house. They were behind some big hitters over the years like Ape Escape, Everybody's Golf, The Legend of Dragoon, the Team Eco trilogy, and assisting From Software with Bloodborne. Beyond that, they were also responsible for many cult classic hidden gems in the later years such as Puppeteer, Tokyo Jungle, Freedom Wars, and Gravity Rush. Astro Bot Rescue Mission, the cute little PSVR game from a few years ago, was their last title under that moniker before getting downsized to the point that Team Asobi was all that was left. The studio would basically just be an outlet for more titles involving Astro going forward. Now, I only got a PS5 this year in 2024. My PS4 disk drive was barely working at this point and my laptop isn't the powerhouse it was 6 years ago. So my investment in the Series X and PS5 were largely a necessity of backwards compatibility machines and an excuse to get physical copies of games I already played and liked. From the handful of exclusive titles I actually had played, Astro's Playroom was definitely my favourite. This 4-hour tech demo for me beat out whatever mishmash of nonsense the Final Fantasy VII Remake saga was building to, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which I thought was just okay. The setup for Astro Bot is that after the events of Astro's Playroom, Astro and company are travelling in the PS5 mothership when they are suddenly attacked by an alien snot monster. He steals the CPU, the mothership is wrecked with all its crucial components missing, and all other passengers have been scattered around the galaxy. Nice simple setup for a simple collectathon platformer. In so many ways, this is basically a 3D Mario game, except with less complex movement tech. I've seen more than a few people make jokes calling it Super Mario Galaxy 3, and I can't say those comparisons are unfounded. I also don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Super Mario Odyssey was 7 years ago now. If we're only going to get 3D Mario games once per console generation, I say why not have something to fill the gap in the meantime. Especially when PlayStation's first-party catalogue has had almost nothing new in the way of platformers the last 2 generations outside of, what, Sackboy's Big Adventure and Puppeteer? Ratchet & Clank barely counts. The platforming in those games has been a distant second to the combat and puzzle since the PS2 era. Astro Bot is very much a fully fleshed out successor to Astro's Playroom. It carries over all the basic mechanics from the original but with a massively expanded arsenal of power-ups. Some are thankfully improved versions of some of the Playroom suits with better controls and a bit less DualSense gimmick rigmarole like the monkey and the armadillo. They all add a great spin on levels, generally integrate well with the core gameplay, and no particular one feels overused. A few of them only get to shine for 1 or 2 levels though. I would have liked to see the shrink power used more than once, for instance. That one had all sorts of clever puzzles and neat level design, and they made great use of depth of field and camera angles to really give an effective sense of scale. They all controlled well, with the only real exception being the pufferfish. Something about switching between inflating and deflating never quite felt comfortable from a control standpoint. The chicken was a more satisfying form of vertical traversal. Across the 6 galaxies in Astro Bot are a varied selection of levels with no one galaxy adhering to a single theme or biome to keep things interesting. Even levels with repeated motifs are different enough that they never feel rehashed or uninspired. You're given a basic selection of stages you can beat in any order you please, as long as you're able to rescue enough bots to unlock the big boss of the galaxy. Astro's Playroom only really had one boss that you unlocked after beating every other area, a fun little callback to that old dinosaur tech demo from one of the old demo discs, and that one was a lot of fun. Astro Bot's bosses are all on the same scale as that, and it's exactly what I was hoping for. Even if the means of defeating most of them generally boils down to stunning them so you can smash their eyes, the fights themselves are all varied enough that no 2 battles feel the same. They make for some great spectacle as well. I don't care how photorealistic your models and environments are on this bloated ass hardware, stuff like this will always look cooler. And this will still look cool in 20 years' time. Once the boss of the galaxy is out of the way, you get one last stage themed around a particular PlayStation franchise, and these are absolutely wonderful. Bots themed after characters from a bevy of franchises can be seen as token fan service, but making stages with gameplay elements from the games that inspired them, complete with remixes of music from those games, that's going the extra mile. I'd only ever watched a friend play Ape Escape 3 years and years ago, but this level put a smile on my face the whole way through. I mean, I own all these games, I should really get around to them at some point. Throughout the game, the difficulty curve remains pretty steady. Nothing on the main path is unmanageable, checkpoints are pretty generous from beginning to end, and while you die in 1 hit in standard levels, bosses will give you 2 extra hits. You can find some hidden challenge stages by interacting with objects on the galaxy map that are more difficult than the standard lineup. They feature more frequent hazards that you have to overcome in one shot with no checkpoints along the way. I've seen a handful of people getting heated over how frustrating some of the simple stages can be, but if you're like me and got broken in at a young age with stuff like Crash Bandicoot, it's nothing you can't handle.
Watch and learn, Clank. This is how a real hero gets it done.
guy thinks he's so cool.
Each stage has upwards of 7 hidden bots to rescue and 3 puzzle pieces. Some obviously along the beaten path, but others are a bit more out of the way. If you do have trouble finding anything, you're given the option to utilize a hint bird near the start of the stage on subsequent visits for a small fee. Most of the hidden collectibles were decently indicated, but I will admit I had to resort to the bird a handful of times. Generally, the most well-hidden collectible of a sort are the hidden portals. Every now and then a level will have one of these which basically serve as a second exit, allowing you to finish the stage early and unlock a new stage in the hidden galaxy. Just some neat extra levels for those with keen eyes. The bots you rescue in stages are generally standard model ship hands, but every now and then you'll find themed bots based on various characters from just about every PlayStation original or PlayStation adjacent franchise under the sun. Some of these go pretty deep, because even though I've been around since the PS1, there were more than a few I didn't recognize. Some did feel like they were pushing the criteria for PlayStation representation though. I mean, Ghosts and Goblins and Space Channel 5? Sure, they had releases on PlayStation platformers eventually, but I'd sooner associate them with the NES and Dreamcast respectively. No Tombi bot anywhere to be seen though. 0 out of 10. Last up is puzzle pieces. While they were pretty much only for the big collage in Astro's Playroom, they unlock extra facilities in the crash site in this game, including the returning gacha machine among others. While a lot of other gacha prizes in Playroom were PlayStation accessories, a good bulk of the prizes here are for objects relating to many of the theme bots hanging around the crash site, and some of these are very cute. While a lot of these nods and references are a lot of fun, it has brought up a bit of discourse surrounding the use of IPs essentially as set dressing in this game. And this is something I wanted to touch on. I've been plenty critical of flagrant use of member berries in the past, so I'm gonna stay consistent. Now look, I'm not made of stone. I'm not immune to nostalgic pandering. Sing some rep for my faves like Crash and Spyro, Abe and Klonoa, Jack and Ratchet, or even deeper cuts like Kutaro from Puppeteer or Cat from Gravity Rush, they all put a smile on my face. But I can say with absolute certainty that way more of this game's appeal than people might be willing to admit would be lost without the fan service and callbacks peppered throughout. That's not to say this game's original content isn't charming in its own right, not at all. The level design and creatures within it stick to the tech meets nature design seen in Astro's Playroom, and I'm a big fan of a lot of the things they came up with using this aesthetic. Astro's design is the same kind of concentrated simplicity that works on the same level that Sackboy did, basically being blank slates to project other designs onto where even their default states are nice to look at. They're like Funko Pops that don't suck. The main villain does suck though. That is just such a boring and generic design that wouldn't be out of place in a commercial for Mucinex or something. However, the part of this that kinda irks me is the way it feels like Sony mandated brand wank. Using the rich history of IPs that in many cases haven't had new games in anywhere from 10 to 25 years, to tickle the nostalgic center of their older install base who now have back problems and bills to pay. And look, I get it. This is one big celebration of PlayStation's 30th anniversary. It only makes sense that you'd have it be one big love letter to franchises new and old that people of all ages and genre demographics would get a kick out of. It was cute within the framing of Astro's Playroom being set inside a PS5, and it's cute here as a history piece. But you guys are really gonna have to knuckle down to give this series its own identity beyond nostalgic pandering going forward. Between that remark on the Platinum Trophy and this game doing so unprecedentedly well that I keep seeing it selling out everywhere, including the EB Games in my dinky little Passover town, you can bet this is going to be an ongoing series. I'm just saying I don't think nostalgic nods like this can carry a franchise forever. There's only so many times we'll go, oh hey, it's Spectre from Ape Escape and Dart from Legend of Dragoon. I remember those games. This isn't a trick you can do multiple times without serious diminishing returns, especially considering how dense the coverage of characters are in this game already. And with how most games nowadays take half a console's life cycle to develop, you're going to be waiting a while before you have enough new IPs for people to get nostalgic over, like Returnal, Stellar Blade, or God forbid Concord. Yeah, people are going to remember that game a year from now. Do you know how insane it would be to tell someone back in the PS2 era, hell, the PS3 era, that there would be an 8-year gap between Ratchet and Clank titles? Insanity. But hey, if the intention was to have people play that Ape Escape level and be so enthralled by it that they head straight to the online store and pick up the original PS1 game, I can't fault them for that. Sony have been slightly better about acknowledging their legacy catalog by slowly reintroducing PS1, PS2 and PSP titles to the store in recent years. There's even been rumors they're working on doing the same for PS3 titles eventually, and if that ends up being true, I'm all on board with that. Assuming there aren't major emulation issues, that is. I'd prefer new games than some of these long dormant or dead IPs, but older titles being officially available in ways other than emulation is nice. I'm getting off topic. Despite some of my misgivings about how the future of the franchise may pan out, Astro Bot was a breath of fresh air in the PlayStation ecosystem. I wouldn't go so far as calling it an all-time great, it's a bit too derivative to be breaking any molds, and I certainly wouldn't say it's worth getting a PS5 just to play it. But that doesn't change the fact it's still a really solid platformer. Controls like a dream, looks and sounds great, plenty of variety, and right in the Goldilocks zone where whether you're trying to collect everything or just trying to make it to the end, it doesn't outstay its welcome. I want this game to do well. Not even because I want more platformers, I just want more comparatively mid-budget games made by smaller teams in 2 to 3 years that prioritize game feel over spectacle. More stuff like this, less cinematic third-person over-the-shoulder action games with fucking skill trees. But on that note, that's all I have to say on the matter. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Whenever that might be. Bye Gravity Rush 1 and 2. Come on, do it for me.